Amanda Knox, it's really good to see you in person.
Yeah, it's great to see you in person as well.
You look terrific and you sound terrific. Are you terrific?
Yeah. I'm a little tired. It's been a long day. It's been an exciting publication day, but I'm really happy and I'm in a really good place right now.
What is the #1 question that people ask you when they meet you for the first time?
Just people in general? Typically now I have my babies with me, so they want to ask me about my babies, which is a really nice sort of like cloak. I'm sort of in disguise as a mom, and people don't really look at me anymore because my kids are so cute. So that's, again, another nice way that I am.
It's like a passage. It's definitely an era
in
life. So this book is era #2. This is your second memoir.
Yeah.
And this really focuses on some things I didn't think were going to happen.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Being in the world of
Neither did I.
Right? I can imagine. In my line of work, those who have been through the criminal justice system and have been treated unfairly don't really want to go back to that pool and dabble and find out why. But you did. You went back to the prosecutor who put you away, asking questions. Yeah. Tell me, A, why, and B, what'd you ask?
Great question. And you're right. Everyone that I talked to in the lead up to doing this and making this decision, in the innocence community, my friends who are lawyers, my friends who are exonerees, my own family, everyone thought I was crazy. Everyone thought that I had a weird fixation on this, I had Stockholm syndrome maybe, like I was clearly interested in this human being who had hurt me, and there was some understanding on the part of the exonerees that I talked to because they want to understand why this had happened to them, but they all told me, it's a losing game. Your prosecutor is never going to see you as a person. He's never going to admit that he's wrong, and you're just wasting your time. And I was afraid of that. Like, a part of me first reached out to him because I wanted to get in touch with him outside of an adversarial system where, you know, as you know, like the courtroom can be a lot like politics, where there are two sides and ne'er shall the two meet on any issue. And I felt like that sort of conflict made it impossible for him to see me as a human being. And as someone who was living with the consequences of being the girl accused of murder, the stigma of that, trying to make sense of that in my own life, the first question I was asking myself was, why? Why is this my life? And I couldn't think of anyone better to ask that than the man who made this my life.
Your life.
And so I originally reached out to him, and I'll be honest, like I reached out to him hoping that if I could show him who I really was, he would recognize that I was not the person that he thought he was prosecuting, that he was wrong, and that he would apologize to me, and that he would get on the rooftops and proclaim my innocence, and my life would be so much better.
And
you're rushing to the end. let me like slow play this for you. And then the pandemic happened, and this meeting that I thought we were going to have immediately after I asked him didn't take place because the world was imploding. And so we spent 2 years corresponding before we ever met in person. And those 2 years were filled with frustrating conversations about the case, but they were also filled with like just personal revelations. We are a shared love of animals, a shared love of classical music, a shared love of Lord of the Rings, like really just human stuff.
Did he see you differently because of this?
Yes. And I saw him differently because of this. Like, so to answer your question, because you just want the answer, he was stunned, like, and very quickly had a shift in perspective about who I was because I had reached out to him. It was just unheard of. And he was even unsure of whether it was even legal for him to communicate with me. Yes, because it had never been done before. And so he looked into case law to see if it was even allowed for him.
Because he's putting things in writing.
Yes, exactly. And he was thinking, I don't know if this is even allowed, but there's no law because no one has ever tried it. And so he agreed to correspond with me after I made a very public statement sort of claiming that he wasn't an evil monster. And he felt sort of honor bound to respond to me. And he was deeply moved by the fact that I genuinely wanted to know him as a human being because he never really had been interested to know me as a human being.
But did something change? Did you get the apology? Did you get any kind of satisfaction from how your repartee went?
So there's this little metaphor that I'm using to describe what it was that I attained from this conversation, this prolonged conversation, and then this meeting, because this meeting took place in person after the 2 years that we corresponded.
In Perugia?
In Perugia. I went back to Italy, I went back to Perugia, and I sat down face to face. I had not seen and been in a room with this man since the courtroom. So here was this man that I had not encountered outside of this like legal environment, sitting across from me, wearing a fishing vest, looking like anybody's grandpa. And we sat across from each other. He held my hand, and he listened to what I had to say first. I told him that I was innocent, that he was wrong about me, and, you know, proceeded to like make the case, not letting him off the hook for like how he had harmed me, but then, you know, showing up and letting him know that I did not think he was a monster. And in fact, I cared about him, and I wished him well, because I had, over the course of 2 years, gotten to know him as the complex, flawed, but ultimately precious human being that he was.
Did that disarm him enough to reciprocate?
Yes.
And say, I'm sorry?
So he did not say, I'm sorry. He did not say, I was wrong. He did say, you are not the person that I thought I was prosecuting, and that if I were asked to prosecute this case again today, I would not.
Wow.
And so the metaphor that I'm trying to use to describe what this experience was like, and he said much more than that, and I talk about it a lot in the book, of like things that, little ways that he has revealed himself to me, not just himself, but his perspective on the case and how it has evolved. He talks, it's almost like this like little chess match where he drops little nuggets to let me understand things about how what he thinks and how his thinking has evolved without explicitly saying it. He's a lawyer, he's very careful. But he wants me to know that he cares about me, that he recognizes he was a source of suffering in my life, and he no longer wants to be that source of suffering.
You going to have a relationship going forward with him, do you think, or is that done?
Well, he texted me today.
Wow.
No, he tends to send me text messages every day.
Every day?
Yeah.
What kind of messages? Like uplifting, or?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time he's keeping up with the Trump debacles and has his own perspective.
He wants a relationship with you.
Yes. He really wants to be my friend, and he is consistently informing me that he cares about me, and he wants me to be happy. And so,
do you enjoy this relationship? Is it as fulfilling for you, perhaps, that it is for him?
Well, it's complicated, right? Like,
I'll say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, like, so the way that I try to approach it is thinking about the world in a very specific kind of way. You can look at the world and at people and at relationships like a department store, where you go in to get what you want, you know where it is, you know that you're gonna find, you know, a box of cereal that you specifically want, you're gonna buy it, you're gonna take it home with you. That's living in a world where you have expectations that you are gonna get what you want or you deserve. I do not think that that's what life is like. I think life is like going to a thrift store, where you might have an idea about what you want, but ultimately you're just going to have to sort of sift through a mountain of stuff that fits you or doesn't fit you until you find that one precious mushroom lamp that will go perfectly into your bedroom. And I think for me, as I'm sifting through honestly, this like inundation of like him revealing himself to me on a daily basis. Wow. I'm looking for, well, I'm allowing myself to be open to the positive things that he has to reveal to me. And I'm not getting caught up or fixated on hearing the words that I need to hear. And I think a big part of it was realizing also that having this correspondence with him and showing up to see him as a human being was ultimately less about what he could give me and more about what I could give him. I could see him as a human being.
He's not the deserving one in this equation. Well, your life was ruined. Your world was turned upside down. Your future was changed forever. You live with the ripple effect of being incarcerated wrongly for 4 years. You live with the trolls on the internet. I got a million questions just about them.
Yes.
Who are these people that will not accept that you are not guilty of this crime?
Well, that's another great question. But like going back to this idea of what do we deserve? Okay, do we deserve anything? Is this a chaotic universe and we're all just doing our best to live in it? Yes, I deserve an apology. I deserve to be recognized as innocent. I deserve for the Italian justice system to completely exonerate me.
Well, you deserve to be actually free. Like, and it's not just free from the bars. It's free from the awful that your life became because of this wrongful conviction. And yet, do you feel like you're ever going to be free from it?
So that's such an interesting question, because that's ultimately like at the heart, the question that is at the heart of this book. Like, can I be free even today, regardless of the circumstance? Like, you know, as you know, you're a news person, you follow cases. I was recently convicted again back in Italy for a lesser charge.
Slander. They decided to go forward with that. That's what I can't believe. If this prosecutor is texting you daily to feel better about what he did, why would they have gone ahead with the slander garbage?
Right. Well, because I think the cost of recognizing my innocence is too high. And I think that
it's okay to recognize it to you via text, just not publicly to the people of Italy.
Well, and this is where, well, I think for him, he's finding himself, I see a person who is torn. And he admits to me that he is very torn. On the one hand, he really is firm that he believes in the work that he did and that he really believed in the case that he was prosecuting. He is not a man who would put an innocent girl in jail based on nothing. And at the same time, he recognizes that
he was wrong.
Well, in not those words, but it is like, I understand from what he is conveying that there is some acknowledgement of the possibility of being wrong.
Does he?
But the point is that if I lived my life where my well-being depended upon me getting what I deserve, I would be living a miserable life.
That's how I was going to ask you, how are you not so angry? But now you've just answered the question.
Well, and the point is that it's not that I'm not angry, but that's not the only thing that I am. And so to be free means to acknowledge all of these things that are, you know, it does not mean tolerating injustice, right? Like, I'm still fighting to clear my name. I'm still trying to make the world a better place than how it treated me. But I have to accept the reality as it is and the imperfect but precious human beings that are a part of it. And so understanding the world as it is allows me to figure out what I need to do, how I need to be, and how I can define my own life by the actions that I take.
You grew up fast, I'll tell you. It takes people a lifetime, and most people don't even get to where you are right now with that.
Right, they're trapped. They're trapped in their own lives and feeling like they don't have a say, or that they need some external validation in order to be fulfilled. And my message right here is that you do not need that. There's no one that can stand between you and your destiny.
When I asked you earlier about the trolls, well, I don't think we'll ever really understand trolldom. I mean,
my husband has very much tried. He has beaten himself over the head trying to talk sense into the trolls. One thing that I will say that I think might have something to do with it is, if you really boil down the case to what it ultimately was, you know, the case and the story, what it all came down to, it was this idea that women hate other women and that we are constantly in sexual competition with each other. And so from that, we derive these archetypes of women, the sexual whore and the pure virgin, and they are pitted against each other.
And the slut shaming that goes with it is just nuclear.
Exactly.
Online.
Exactly. And so in that web, in that morass of a story, I got turned into that sexualized villain.
Foxy
Noxy, the demon, you know, the femme fatale, Luciferina, all of that. And Meredith got turned into an uptight, judgmental version, who she was not. She was not uptight and judgmental. She was not a virgin. And she was a very nice, somewhat introverted, but like smart and fun and casual girl, like just like me. And so we were both misrepresented for this narrative that people latch onto, especially, I think it feeds into some male fantasy about what women's place in the world is and how it is in the service of them. It is in the service of their desires and their fantasies. And so I think it comes a little bit down to that people are projecting onto this story some kind of deep, unmet need, and maybe even some deep unmet wound, and they are just attaching my name and face to it.
When there's a media circus, and you name it, Jodi Arias, Casey Anthony, whether it was the Foxy Knoxy headline, now we have Idaho. And I saw something developing in Idaho I just could not believe.
What's
and that
going
was
on?
The quadruple murder of these 4 students in Idaho and the 2 surviving roommates. Suddenly the internet decided to attack the 2 surviving roommates, to suggest that they had something to do with it. And I wondered what your thoughts are about that kind of a dynamic that's now playing out.
Right, that if somebody's, there's a sort of survivor's guilt by proxy, where if you have survived a crime, that must mean that you must be involved with it, because how otherwise might have you survived it? That I find that deeply, deeply troubling, that not only have they been utterly victimized by this experience, but now they are being suspected merely because they are they're in the play, they are victims of the crime. They're physically present. That's insane. And it's very similar to my case where I lived in that house. That's what the prosecution could prove. But they immediately latched onto this idea that it was a conspiracy, that it wasn't the break-in that it seemed, and therefore the roommate has to be involved.
Do you have advice for these 2 young women who are in this world, that they're trolled endlessly? They have to go through a trial, they have to testify, and they're traumatized by the hell they've been through.
Well, first of all, are they actually being accused by the
Just
detectives?
the internet trolls.
Just the internet trolls.
Yeah.
Okay, so as long as they,
different.
right, they don't need to lawyer up necessarily. Right. What I would say is, and this is going to be hard for them, but do not take it personally, because whatever people are projecting onto you, they're projecting onto an idea of you that doesn't exist, that says way more about them than it does about you. Protect yourself. And you know what? You don't have to engage with the bullshit online. It really doesn't matter. It isn't a part of who you are. It is in the sense that our reputation matters because it allows us, it's like a bank account. It's how we can navigate the world. Who I am is, and in the eyes of another human being, will impact the way that I can relate to that human being. However, the trolls, I have yet to encounter an actual troll in my human life. I only encounter them online. And
The bravery.
I know, right?
The bravery of it.
Right, and I mean, but there are people out there who will threaten your life, and so you don't know, so you have to live in a constant state of paranoia. Obviously, keep track of that, get yourself a victim support person, go to the FBI and have them track it, all of that. I had to go to the FBI and do that when somebody was sending me very, very explicit death threats, and they went and knocked on his door and were like, hey, I guess you have freedom of speech, but you might want to knock it off because we're paying attention to you. Be safe, but do not take it personally.
You have found a great alliance with people like you, like Monica Lewinsky, for one. She might have been the first, of the internet age to be descended upon and cannibalized.
Yeah, and the 24-hour news cycle was just horrible with her. So.
How is that relationship? I mean, do you both identify with each other in a way that no one will ever understand?
Well, I think people can understand, but yes, absolutely. When I first met Monica, I recognized in her someone who was showing me the way out of the grave that I had been buried in. And I met her at a time in my life when the messaging I received was that I needed to shut up and disappear because my story didn't matter, I didn't matter, and no one would believe me anyway, even if I tried to tell my story. And then Monica showed up in my life, and she showed me that it took her a long time, but like she could arrive at a place where she stood above that box that people had tried to limit her and used it as a platform to tell her own story. And that really taught me something. And also just her warmth as a human being. Like, she really sort of took me under her wing and mentored me in a way that I needed, and that no one in my life could really give me that kind of guidance, because my own family didn't have a perspective on how to deal with this. And there was no guide to being a globally vilified woman.
There still isn't, which is why I find it so fascinating that you found strength in each other, and that she, as a trailblazer, had to first learn the internet, learn what it is, and then navigate herself out of it. And she's done a remarkable job. She's a spectacular person, and she's benevolent and kind and charitable and
very very much interested in elevating people who have been like pushed down, women especially who have been just like brutalized. She is so good at that.
A couple things from the book, just because they were just so fascinating. You learned to speak Italian with a Harry Potter book in prison.
Yes. Yeah, well, you got to learn somehow, because nobody was speaking English. And so I had to very quickly try to navigate an environment that was hostile and foreign to me. And I was trapped in a cell with people who could not speak English. And so I immediately navigated to something that was familiar, and it didn't hurt that it was YA, so it was a little bit easier to read than, you know, a more adult book.
Wait, what's YA?
Young adult.
Young adult book.
Yes.
Okay. But you had read it in English, correct?
Oh, yes. I had read it like 10 times already.
And you found it in the prison library in Italian?
Yes. That was a lucky break. And I just sat there with that book and translated it, you know, sentence by sentence until I had figured out the language. And
and you still want to speak it today. Like, you're not done with that. Cut it from my life. You're not divorcing yourself of the awfulness that was. You're embracing it.
Yes. My mom has, like, against her will, learned some Italian from the sheer amount of time that she spent there. But she has that perspective of, I want nothing to do with it.
I get it.
And I get it too. Yeah. But for me, I look at it as I grew up in Italy in a very big way. I grew up more than I should have in Italy in a very big way. And so Italy is a part of me now. The language is a part of me. When I came home, I was slipping into Italian. I couldn't remember what language I was even speaking. And it felt like it was a denial of that part of me that survived prison. Like, that is an important part of who I am that I embrace. And the other thing that I wanted to acknowledge was that it wasn't like everybody was evil to me in Italy. I talk about my friendship with the prison priest and how like he was there to hold my hand through that experience when my family wasn't able to be there. And so there are beautiful and wonderful things about the language and the culture and the people that if I'm a responsible person, must acknowledge. And so even going back to Italy to meet my prosecutor, one of the goals that my husband and I, we had a mantra going into it. And our mantra, going into the most beautiful depths of Mordor that you could possibly go down to, was make good memories. We need to make good memories, because I have so many bad memories from Italy, and I feel like they are misrepresentative of what Italy can be and is to so many people. And I wanted it to be that way for me again. And, you know, I visited the house where I had lived, where this whole tragedy had happened. I did. I mean, I didn't go inside, obviously. Someone else is living there, but I went up to it and I approached it. And I remember just feeling this dark, dark dread in my body. And then I saw it, and it was just a house. It was a house that someone else was living in now. And I had this just astonishing realization that it was just a place. It was a place where hearts had been broken and people had been hurt and love had been expressed, and the whole spectrum of human existence is in a place, and it isn't just bad. And so it was a very big relief for me to realize that this place that I associated with deep dread and fear and pain could also just be a place.
Just a house.
It's just a house.
Not the same for the prison, though. You write about some of the experiences with the prison guards.
Yeah.
And the reason why you cut your hair off short and why you wore baggy dingy clothing.
Yes.
It's very upsetting to see.
Yeah, no doubt, yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but explain some of the things that happened from those guards and how far it went.
Yeah, so I was the famous one in the prison. I was one of the youngest prisoners. I was also one of the few prisoners that had all of my teeth. I was a cute little kid, and I was also being highly sexualized in the media as this like whore who would go with anybody. And so I think some male guards got the idea that if they could just find themselves alone in a room with me, they could take advantage of that. And so two things come to mind. One is that the vice comandante, the second in command in the prison, for something like 2 weeks was bringing me into a private office alone in the first weeks of my being in prison, and was asking me about my sex life. And it was just like, he wanted to know what kind of underwear I liked to wear, what kind of positions I liked to be in, if I would like to have sex with him. And I like in that moment, I froze. I didn't really know what to do. I pretended that I didn't understand him. He would get frustrated or bored and then send me back, but he would kept bringing me back in. Another occasion was I was in my cell, and the plumbing stopped working in our cell, so they had to bring in some plumbers, and the guard was supervising the plumbers in the cell, and then they left. But I was in the bathroom sort of showing them that, you know, it wasn't going down the drain. And as soon as the plumbers left, he grabbed me around the waist, pulled me into him, and like swooped in to try to kiss me. And I don't even remember like how it didn't feel like I had the presence of mind. I felt like I was in slow motion and kind of underwater, and I just like swooped underneath him, like dodging his face, and like pirouetted out of his arms, and then went back onto my bed and like waited for a female guard to come by, and I just sat there.
Terrified.
I didn't move. I just sat there and just stared at the bed until he left. Because then what was I going to do?
Did it ever go beyond that?
No, I mean, I was, you know, stripped naked and photographed, but that was part of my,
process.
Yeah, that was part of the process. And I was routinely stripped naked in order to visit, like anytime I wanted to visit my family members. So like this whole process of prison, I don't know if you know, is like utterly degrading.
Yes, it is.
It's very dehumanizing.
You lose everything. You
lose everything.
Your rights, everything.
Absolutely. And so like I had to, once I was immersed in that environment, I had to, well, at first, I felt like I was living somebody else's life by mistake. And so my family and I had this like metaphor of where there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and we just have to like hold on and get through until we get to the end of the tunnel. But then when the verdict came in and I was facing a 26-year sentence, I no longer felt like there was any light, and that the truth mattered, and that I would ever be vindicated. And so I reframed my experience to be like, okay, how do I make this worth living? And one of the really interesting things that I discovered was that it was actually really easy for me to find a sense of purpose in prison because of how limited it was and how few resources there were and how much need there was. And I realized very quickly that once I became fluent in Italian, I could read, I could write, I could translate. I had nice handwriting. People wanted me to write their letters for them, not just because I was fluent in the language, but because they looked pretty when they would send them to their husband or to their kids.
You found value.
And yes, and I found value that helped me to survive the prison environment. But then, shocker, I got out of prison, and I suddenly found myself overwhelmed with suppressed rage, but also with like a deep sadness because my purpose in the world was no longer clear to me. I did not have a place in the world where I was valued because I was the girl accused of murder. And no one could relate to me. No one wanted my baggage anywhere near them. And I was afraid to relate to people because I didn't belong. And so in a weird way, I sort of figured out how to belong in prison, and I dreamed about this day that I would get to go back to being a free person. But then once I got my wish, it was not what I thought it was. And I had to rediscover my role and my purpose in life, not in spite of, but because of everything that was now true about my existence.
Do you belong now?
Yes. Yes, I feel very comfortable in my own skin, in my own place in the world. I feel very confident in my purpose. My purpose is multidimensional. I have a daughter, I have a daughter and a son. I'm a mom. I'm an advocate. I'm a writer. I help people tell stories. I tell my own story. I try to pass legislation to make the criminal justice system more fair and transparent. And all of that would not exist were it not for this worst experience of my life.
Being in the business I'm in, I am thankful that you decided not to bury all of that and instead to embrace it and then help impart this on others, because I think a lot of people do need to know this. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.